Hi. We need to talk. Because I can't believe what I just watched, honestly. Hi everyone, Gabby here, and to end off October, the month of spooky, horror, all things scary, I needed to talk about what I had anticipated to become one of my new favorite horror anime being an absolute pile of garbage. If you've been on the internet at all, I feel like everyone has been talking about the disappointment that was the newly released Uzumaki adaptation, and I too needed to add to this discourse because I truly just watched the whole thing and I've never felt more disappointed in an anime adaptation in maybe my entire life. Like, actually, this was horrendously awful. And if you don't want me to break down episode by episode every problem I had with it, just know that I don't recommend this anime really to anyone at all. I feel like the only people this anime could be good for are people that are too scared to read Uzumaki and want like a really bizarrely poorly adapted version minus all of the scary. I'm not making much sense, but we're gonna go right into it. I literally took notes as I was watching each episode because I knew I would immediately want to forget what I watched. Also, before I progress into this video, if you don't want any spoilers, if you don't like horror, if you don't want to hear me describe scary things, just don't watch this video. Just go watch one of my pre-cure videos. Wait till next week. You'll have a sunshine rainbow video to watch then, but today we need to talk about horror anime because I'm tired of being disappointed. And someone else needs to understand how I feel because I quite literally have no one else to talk to but my cat and my snake, and neither of them have opinions on what I just watched. If you have no idea what I am talking about, Uzumaki is a manga that was written by Junji Ito and is one of his more popular stories. I feel like a lot of people recognize Uzumaki from all the spirals, and you know, spirals. The show did spiral. I will give it that. It spiraled from really good to as bad as possible. So, I will read to you the plot in case you really need to know what the plot is. Uzumaki follows the high school teenager Kyrie Goshima and her boyfriend Shuichi Saito and the citizens of the small, quiet Japanese town of Kurozucho, which is enveloped by supernatural events involving spirals. What I think really has led to this anime being so bizarrely received, and rightfully so based on the awful quality of the show, this anime was announced in 2019, pre-COVID. Crunchyroll put out the announcement that there was going to be an Uzumaki series. And I remember like everyone I knew was obsessed with it. Everyone was so excited to finally, hopefully have a good Junji Ito adaptation, because the different Junji Ito anime that we've received have not gotten great reviews. But I almost would say I think I liked the Junji Ito collection more than I liked this. And I didn't like the Junji Ito collection. I really didn't. So I feel like one of people's main complaints overall when it comes to turning a Junji Ito work into an anime is you lose the page turning suspense that you would get when you're reading a manga, or if you're reading it on your phone and you're scrolling. You lose all that suspense. And so I think a lot of people, myself included, were a little nervous to see how this would be replicated in some sort of way. Because you definitely can create suspenseful anime, and I think a lot of series have created suspense, but it's such a quintessential part of horror manga, and so to see if it can be replicated into animation was something I honestly was really intrigued to see how they would do. But I digress. So it was originally announced in 2019. It was supposed to come out in 2020, and then obviously it was delayed till 2022, and then from 2022 it was delayed to this year, 2024. So we've been waiting for this for a while, and I think Through the interviews that I read about the delays, they were very concerned about wanting to really replicate the work and really wanting to stick to the source material. And that again made myself and many other people incredibly optimistic that this was going to be good. And then the trailer dropped. If you haven't seen the trailer, honestly, it's all the good parts of the anime. And I mean that so nicely because the trailer is only episode 1. Now, if you've read the story, you'll know that as you're kind of watching the trailer, some things are kind of out of order and it's a little, you know, a little interesting. But because of that, I thought that the trailer was snippets from different episodes based on how they were going to pace it out. No, the trailer exclusively showed us episode 1, which was made by one animation studio, and then episodes 2 and 3 were made by a completely different animation studio, but episode 4 went back to the first studio. Does that make sense? That really, oh my goodness. Okay, so I feel like I gotta just start by talking about episode 1. Okay, we're gonna start with episode 1, which again, everything from the trailer is in episode 1, and that's why both of these pieces honestly are incredible. Like, truly, I would recommend watching just episode 1 and reading the rest of the book. Honestly, that's my recommendation because I think episode 1 is a beautiful adaptation of the story as a standalone piece. What I loved about episode 1 was the overall fluidity in the animation. It was so smooth. And like all the movements truly were so fluid. Like it literally felt almost like you were turning a page. Like it like moved so fluidly. And one of my friends mentioned that maybe it was done with rotoscope animation. I don't actually know if it was, but honestly, the way the characters moved, especially for close-up scenes, they really had very realistic 3D feeling movements. And it was very impressive. I loved the way a lot of the line work and the shading was done. It really did replicate Ito's drawing style. And it like, you could almost like feel it. Like it was so, there was so much depth and texture in every single scene. And it was so well matched by the audio. Like I can very vividly remember when the first guy starts turning into a snail and like you can see like the ooze on his skin and like the sounds played so perfectly with that. It was just so, like everything matched up perfectly because I feel like when you're reading horror, it's not like you're hearing necessarily, like part of the fear factor in it is that your brain is going to like inevitably make the sounds that would match up with what you're visually reading. And so it was really well done. Like the matching of the audios to the visuals, I thought was very well done. Another scene where I thought that the sound really did add to the story and especially like the horror of it and building suspense is when Azami is, you know, spiral-eyed. Like if you've seen this character, you know what you know Uzumaki. But as her eye is like spiraling around in her head, there's such perfect sound effects of it like thumping around and like the body horror noises were so, like it just fit everything so perfectly. It really added suspense. It was filling in all this extra information that you wouldn't necessarily hear while reading the story. And so it really added so much to the visuals that were already beautiful, beautiful visuals. And another part of the visuals I really liked that just stuck out to me in my notes was when Kirie is talking to Azami and Shuichi shows up and then you can start seeing like the spiral effects around her, but they like so transparently go over her face and so it literally looks like it's drawn over her. It was literally like you took the manga and brought it to life. Like it was so beautifully done. I loved it. Truly, I cannot recommend if you want to get into Junji Ito, if you want to read Uzumaki, I genuinely recommend watching the first episode and then reading the book. That is my overall recommendation. Because then we get to episode 2. And I remember when episode 2 came out, I remember the internet collectively was like, what happened? And that was when people found out that there was a different animation studio for episode 2 and 3. Now, I don't fully understand what technically happened to result in the different studio changes. I've heard a bunch of different things online, so I don't think I can speak on what necessarily happened and what I've heard, because I don't need no legal problems. But I've heard things as to why the studios changed. And immediately you can feel the difference. Like, honestly, episodes 2 and 3, I just fully lost any sort of suspense that was part of the story. Because even the episode starts where you see the snail guy again, and remember how earlier I was saying that like the sound and the texture and everything really went together? He has no texture on him. There's no goo on him. There's nothing there to like give you the reason for these sound effects. Like, they're playing the same sound effects, but there's no visual component which matches the sound effects. And I noticed this throughout episode 2 and 3, that you would continue to have really good sound design for certain moments, and then the visuals did not match it at all. Like, you can't have squelching noises and these pulls and all these different noises if the visuals don't convey that at all. It's just not effective storytelling. Throughout episode 2 in particular, I noticed that anytime you saw a character's face, if you weren't up close to see their face, it literally looked so bad. Like, there was no clear expressions in characters' faces unless they literally were right in front of you. And the walking animation, oh my god. You know how I said episode 1 was fluid, and every time, like, quite literally, it literally looked like they recorded people walking to know how to animate walking. The walking in episode 2, and there's a lot of walking in episode 2 and episode 3. There's a lot of walking. And it was just so flat and like robotic. Like, there was no life to it. It was so bizarre and such an interesting choice from an animation perspective, because it made it seem so flat, and like I kept getting pulled out of suspenseful moments because of the animation choices, and the way the art was being portrayed honestly made it like not scary at all. And you can argue that because I've read it and know what happens, it's not scary to me, but I still think something can be scary even if you know what's gonna happen. And so another issue that I had really going through episodes 2 and 3 is there was a lot of random jumps in between stories. Now, I understand they had to take a lot of chapters and condense them into 4 episodes, but what was really weird is there would be literal jump cuts between different storylines with no explanation of how we got in between them. None at all. Like, we would be telling one story and then weirdly jump. Sometimes our jump cuts were literally a white screen in between scenes. Like, it was so bizarre, and it really immediately takes you out of the suspense. It takes you out of the story. It takes any fear away, to be honest. It just doesn't have any continuity. That's the word I wanted. Continuity. You need it. And so what really, yeah, I especially felt it in episode 3 because they randomly jump to living in, like, I forget what it's called, not the boathouse, but like in episode 3 they randomly, like, we're telling one story and then immediately somehow Kyrie and her family are in like the rundown shack with no explanation as to what happened. Like, we went from like the kiln burning down to an immediate cut to them just like sitting inside the other house. Like, there's so, like, the threads that we needed to tell the story were literally all just cut, and it made no sense. And honestly, if I hadn't read the story, I wouldn't know what the heck was going on. Like, I was getting so confused that I truly lost so much attention in the story. And then episode 4, thankfully the last episode. Really, my only note, because I didn't want to repeat myself over and over, my main note was the scene where Shuichi falls down the spiral. It literally, they took the drawing of him and just dropped it down. The fact that episode 4 was made by the same studio as episode 1 genuinely confuses me, because it literally looked exactly like episodes 2 and 3. I was really hoping the conclusion would feel the same as episode 1, and that was not the case at all. And it just was so bizarrely disappointing. Now, I know I'm probably repeating and like preaching to the choir here. Like, we all kind of feel the same way. But I feel like episode 1 showed us that there is a possibility truly to replicate Junji Ito's work into animation. And I almost wonder if they kept it as a one-shot of just that episode, or if they took more of his short stories, because he has a bunch of short story collections as well, besides like his main stories. I honestly think if they took a bunch of short stories and animated them the way episode 1 was animated, even if they're less popular stories, I think would be a really good start to build up the credibility of we can have an Ito work animated. Because I really think episode 1 was such a good step in the right direction, and I want to be hopeful, and I really do think that's the best next step. I think if an animation studio could pick up a collection of his short stories and animated them in the same way that episode 1 was animated, and I know that some people think like the Junji Ito collection anime is that, and it is some of the short stories, but also they kind of connect stories throughout the Junji Ito collection, which I didn't necessarily like. But I think if they truly did just select some short stories and animate them the same way, and I would keep the black and white animation as well. I honestly, the way the sound design, especially in episode 1, worked, it kept the gore gory even though there was no color. And I thought it was really effective. So I just think the next step, whenever that will be, is for them to adapt a bunch of his short stories, or potentially do a film instead of a series, because I think what's really difficult as well is because adapting a story into an anime versus like, you know, like if you're adapting like a manga into an anime, there's like multiple volumes and chapters, and yes, there are multiple volumes and chapters in a Junji Ito story. But I think because most people read the collections, which are like the big volumes, you get the whole story at once if you want to. And I think going the short story route or film route would more effectively convey his stories rather than episodic animation. I will give the voice actors a lot of credit. I thought the voice acting was really good. I did watch the sub and not the dub, so I can't speak on the dub. I thought the Japanese voice acting was really good. Again, towards later on in the show, I did notice some like voice acting not matching up with the animation, which isn't the voice actor's fault. But honestly, the voice actors are what kept me hooked on the story, even though the visuals really kind of started lacking for me. I feel like I just said so much and so little all at once, but honestly, I was so disappointed that I felt like I needed to talk to someone and like open up a discussion, because I need someone else to talk about this with, because I genuinely feel like I've just watched the worst horror anime ever. And I love watching a bad anime, let me tell you. I love a bad anime. I love a bad horror anime. I love a bad horror movie. But like, when all the scare is taken out of a piece, it's just impossible to feel like, I couldn't feel bad for anything happening to the characters, and I couldn't feel bad when something scary happened. Like it felt like nothing. And it was so disappointing because you could tell from episode 1 that they really were putting so much work into this. And I really think that team could make something amazing. And I hope they do. I hope those people get an opportunity to make something as amazing as what they made in episode 1, because it truly was that good. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, because I need someone to back and forth with me on this. I genuinely do enjoy Junji Ito horrors, stories. Like I love the way he really can tell a scary story, and it like actually makes my skin crawl. I just want someone to make his work for me. If you've also watched the Uzumaki anime, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I would love to open up a discussion of what we think could be done next even, because I really do think going the route of a collection of short, like one shots, is that what they're called? Like if you did a bunch of short stories, I think that would have been really interesting to see. And I want to be optimistic for whatever Junji Ito adaptation comes next. I know this video was incredibly rambly and nothing like what I normally make. Honestly, I did debate making a PowerPoint, but I really just don't have the energy to do that right now. So thank you all so much for watching this week's video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here, yes, you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It's right there. Woo! And in the comments, like I said, let me know your thoughts on the Uzumaki anime, and if you have any recommendations for horror anime, please leave them in the comments so that way anyone else that is looking for a spooky anime before the end of October finds something they'll like. Honestly, some of my favorites, oh, that's so hard. I really like the Higurashi series. It's one that I do enjoy. It is very scary. There's a lot of gore. Please be warned. Please don't watch it if you can't do horror. But I do genuinely enjoy the Higurashi series. That's one of my favorite horror anime. Also, follow me over on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to see cosplay content. I want to do a cosplay from a horror anime or horror game so badly, but I don't know yet what I want to do. Like, I've always been curious to do a Tomie cosplay and like sculpt like some sort of facial prosthetic, or I know one of my friends said he would cosplay Corpse Party with me, and I would like still to cosplay from Corpse Party really badly. I think it would be fun and silly. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!